Good morning and welcome to everyone joining in. We're extremely happy that all of you can join us for the September edition of the TECHRx series, Accelerating MedTech Innovation, where we bring to the forefront MedTech innovations in India. TECHRx is a collaboration between INC and AMTZ, the Andhra Pradesh MedTech Zone, and we're delighted to bring to you this edition that marks more than a year of doing this series of conversations, and we hope that you'll take some valuable insights from the conversation today as well. INC, with its decade-long legacy, is a pioneer in accelerating the journeys of game changers all across the world. And AMTZ focuses on a progressive initiative by being a center for medical technology, employment, innovative research, and incubation of startups. Today, INC and AMTZ have collaborated to create a dialogue between the scientific and the social segments of the society with a series called TECHRx. Today's session is going to be a 60-minute session with the last 15 to 20 minutes open for live Q&A and discussion. We are also streaming this on YouTube, so you may type in your questions on the YouTube comment box, or if you're joining in live from the AMTZ Center, we request you to just come on the mic and share your questions, and our panelists will address them at the end of the session. With that, I'd like to call upon Lakshmi Pratury, the founder and CEO of INC, who's also the host and curator for today's event. Lakshmi is an entrepreneur, curator, speaker, and storyteller, and she's a recipient of numerous awards and honors, including the Forbes magazine Women to Watch in Asia. She's written for leading publications like Fortune, Deccan Chronicle, and has been featured in international publications as well. Recently, she's also been doing digital shows like the COVID Lockdown Live series and Lakshmi's Leadership Lounge. With that, I would request you to play the video from AMTZ, and after which I'd request Lakshmi to come on, please. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lakshmi Pratury, and I'm really thrilled today to invite a dear friend and someone I respect a lot to have a conversation with us. Let me introduce you a little bit to the speaker before I invite him onto the video. Dr. Shriram Nene is a cardiovascular and thoracic surgeon. He's a healthcare innovator, Bollywood film producer, health and wellness social media influencer, an edutech pioneer, and most importantly, an amazing friend and a very wonderful human being. He's currently residing in Mumbai, India. He's born in London, raised in United States, He studied medicine and practiced as a surgeon for almost 17 years. He returned to India in 2011 and started his entrepreneurial journey by co-founding R&M Moving Pictures and world's first gamified online dance academy, Dance with Madhuri, along with his wife Madhuri Nene. Dr. Nene is married the famous Bollywood actress Madhuri Dixit. And this is the part I love about Ram is that she spent so many years in US and then it was her turn to get back to her career. So he moved back with her. And it's truly an equal partnership between Madhuri and Ram. And so they came back October 17, 1999, and they have two children, Aaron and Ryan. And they're kind of making their way back to US because Aaron is now started going back to college in US. So hopefully we'll see Ram going back and forth a little bit now. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Dr. Nene lent a helping hand to save municipal corporation. He helped the state municipal corporation to strategize and contain the virus. He also launched the health tech startup called Pathfinder Health Services Private Limited, whose primary focus is to develop personalized precision healthcare journeys. And he's someone who's constantly at the cutting edge of technology, medicine, and human interest. And you'll find a lot about him. So with that, Ram, can you please join us?
Lakshmi, always an honor, and it's great seeing you again. Thank you for such a great introduction, and can't wait to talk with you and with all of these people here and about something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, and so Ram, I just wanted to actually start at the beginning. You know, you're a doctor by profession, but somebody who's been dabbling in technology since you were a teenager. You know, you used to you taught yourself how to program on Apple IIe. How did that start in you? Like, where did that interest in programming start?
So you know, my vision was always to be a Renaissance man, and the kinds of people who inspired me were Da Vinci, Michelangelo. They would wear many hats. This was well before the Elon Musks and the Bill Gates and all of these guys started doing, you know, varied stuff. But my father had actually bought an Apple IIe in 1981, and there were no teachers, no courses. And for an 11-year-old back then, I was intrigued because the kinds of worlds you could create were phenomenal. And I just kind of dove in along with my other, you know, interests, tennis, this, that, the other. And it became so interesting that 3 years later, I was teaching the computer science club, and I created a small company which produced software for my mom's real estate farm. So it would do databasing and email, or rather, back then there was no email, but it was mail, actually, mailing labels, and it would keep track of clients, almost like a project management database. And then I took that one step further, and I worked with one of the universities in creating something that downloaded genome coding databases. And I'd won a number of awards from the Independent Press Telegram, which I never forget. One of my huge sort of idols, Ray Bradbury, gave me the award. I don't know if you know who he is, but he wrote Fahrenheit 451 and just a huge number. And I'm a huge science fiction fan. So the idea of this was fundamental to who I was. And, you know, I think the crossroads or the turning point was, and we see this a lot with Indian parents, they say, you either become a doctor or engineer or we won't pay for it. And so I was very fortunate in translating that and getting into a very competitive scholars program in medicine at WashU. And WashU allowed me to breathe. It allowed me to take my minor in CS and my minor in history at the same time as doing a major in biology and almost a major in chemistry as well. And I graduated early, sold real estate, did a lot of business side functions. And then I went to med school, and the rest is history.
So the parents say you become either a doctor or an engineer. So you become a doctor and an engineer. I think it's so.
Yeah, well, I think the doctor came first, but you know, with medicine, a lot of it is engineering as well, if you think about it. And particularly
Right.
with what I went into with heart surgery, you are, breaking down and rebuilding a biologic
Mhm.
system. So you're a biomechanical engineer because the forces and the relationships, whether you're reconstructing aortas or putting in new valves or you're bypassing coronaries. And so the relationships are a lot of physics, a lot of math, a lot of things which you learn early on. And so that was intriguing. Plus, you had a lot of toys to play with. I was a Da Vinci surgeon, a robotic surgeon. I did endovascular. I did almost 500 endovascular grafts where you deploy through a small puncture in the groin and get into, artery and then basically replace the whole artery from the inside. And
Mhm.
then and the results, I think that's where heart surgery is heading. Now we're doing TAVRs, which are basically replacing valves through a catheter, and then catheterizations and stents are there. And so minimally invasive as we know it is becoming more common. And the real question is, are we going to be doing it? It's like, I was a huge Star Trek fan, and Bones would talk about open surgery as medieval, right?
Yeah.
There may come a day in the next 25 to 50 years where we can swing the pendulum from acute care to prevention, early recognition, early treatment, and intervene sooner and do it in a less invasive way and get people back on their way.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's very interesting because everything inside our body is really electronics and biomechanical, and there's all sorts of systems. And I think this whole thing of biology and engineering coming together is quite natural. And continuing on the same thought, we're talking about innovation, right? So it's sort of um, what sort of things are necessary, you think, to order a certain scale of innovation in medicine and healthcare? Uh,
I,
you've seen, I mean, you've done, just as you're talking about, you've done a lot of surgeries, you've brought a lot of innovative practices. How do you think innovation happens and how can it be scaled?
So I think, like anything else as an entrepreneur, we look for gaps, right? We look for problem statements which require fixing, and we try to see if it's a scalable instance. And so in healthcare, I mean, there's a lot of them. Look in the pandemic, right? CRISPR-Cas9, which is the technology on which the mRNA vaccines were built, didn't exist until 2012. I mean, the basics were put in much sooner than that. But look what's happened since then, right? And now they can splice and create these and then put them on a vehicle, either a take that actual protein, the surface protein, put that into a mRNA sequence, put it on a liposomal vehicle, and then get the body to take it in and use the ribosomes, the native ribosomes, to generate that. So that's how far we've come. But I think it has to be on several different levels. I think the first thing is there has to be an environment which is conducive to great collaborations. And in India, I think what has been one of our shortcomings is that the ties between the industry and basic science research and medicine are not always there, right? In the US, if you see, those ties are very solidified. And I think in order to bring it all together, you have to have collaboration between the different shareholders because each adds a different thing. The scientist is going to look at the pure science aspect of it and look at how to render it. The physician is going to add relevance to the clinical condition. And the business of it is going to see how they can scale it and fundamentally make it sustainable. And, in the US now, it's also true. NIH grants and all that are drying up. I mean, the
Yeah.
government support of fundamental research has gone to an all-time low, in my opinion, given inflation-adjusted dollars. And when you look at the amount of money going from private pharma, private corporations like Google and Facebook and all that, they're immense. Now come to India, right? We've got 1.35 billion patients. And if we can, take care of our own, and this brings me to one other point, that we used to outsource all of our software solutions and be the provider to the world. What I'd like to see, and part of the reason I came back is that if we can provide for our own population, and from there design stuff for the planet with different skins, with different avatars, then we are a jump ahead, and we already have the statistical power in terms of numbers. And so I'm very bullish on the ability to do it. The second thing, which I think is a struggle in India, is the hardware part of it. We've always been behind on the hardware. Now, some of my friends like Kiran from Biocon is doing some fabulous work in biologicals as well as pharmaceuticals. And some of the other guys at the R and Poonawalla and all these guys have done some phenomenal work. But I think there's a long way to go. And I do think that a lot of the private industry will lead this, because remember, at the end of the day, only 4% of our GDP goes to healthcare, of which 2/3 of that is private pay, cash on hand. Whereas in the US, 18% last year was given towards healthcare. So, in terms of impact, it's huge when you multiply by numbers. But how much money can we actually give? Only 4% of the population pays tax, right, as we know it. So how much money are you going to have from government grants? It has to be privatized.
Yeah, and actually, you write a lot about this. You talk a lot about this. In one of your blog posts, you even wrote about the importance of combination therapy and how we could create a system that would aid the prevention, early recognition, early treatment. Because one of the things is in India, there is no insurance system, or there isn't a system that can find things early. So talk a little bit more about what you would like to see happen, and I know you're behind the scenes of actually making a lot of things happen. So
yeah,
tell me a little bit about it.
So you're absolutely right. Insurance constitutes probably no more than 10% of the total population of India. And then if you look at yellow cards and orange cards and things like that, you get some more, but it's always too late. And disease in India often becomes what we call a natural history study. I would, in one of my blogs, I wrote that when you're born, other than getting a slap on the butt to cry and expand your lungs, there's no manual to life. And the fundamental thesis or problem, as I see it, is that people need to have a personalized precision healthcare system, which not only teaches them what to do, but gives them a means, I call it a BAT utility belt, which empowers them to take care of themselves. And then we just act as sort of co-founders, if you will, in that we walk on the journey of life with them. Because my feeling is that if a lot of things were dealt with, and I'll give you an example, right? As a heart surgeon, we would often operate on coronaries. In coronary artery disease, it's fairly late in the game. You can often predict who's at risk and why. And if you intervene sooner, then the likelihood of lifelong issues with decrease in ejection fraction, ability of the heart to pump are less, right? And so while we could save lives by bypassing coronaries, we couldn't turn back the clock. And so one of the keys to this, that was the first thing. The second thing is, as a heart surgeon, at most, we could operate on 3 to 5 patients a day, but realistically, 500 patients a year. You can't scale one surgeon. And what I saw is with my other skill sets and with all of this, that we could create an instance where we could scale it to billions of people, because the world has 7 billion people on it. And, people are struggling more now than ever, but I see a very amazing opportunity to do good.
Yeah. And, we talked a little bit about when you came back first, you did the whole dance with Madhuri thing. You used your technology to do something different. And now you've come back to your, you were always doing your medical, innovation. And you've now come back to, incubate Pathfinder Health Sciences. So tell me a little bit about it. What is your vision to revolutionize healthcare with what you're doing?
Yeah, so let me ask you something. How do you get your healthcare, and what's important to you? Do you go in when you're sick, or do you follow certain principles based on your own family history, medical history, genetics? I mean, how do you do it in your case as well as your family's case? What normally happens? What's your
So,
algorithm?
obviously, you always go to the doctor when you're sick for sure. But one of the things, at least during the pandemic, we've all became aware of is how to keep ourselves healthy. So it's sort of check your blood sugar and this kind of, because my family, everybody's diabetic. So you're always
Yeah.
checking to make
Yeah.
sure you're not anywhere there. And to work out regularly, to eat carefully. I mean, in a very interesting way, Ram, and when earlier we talked about it a little bit also, is that this pandemic in some ways has brought people together and brought a lot of discipline into our lives, because you're not flying every second day, on a flight and things, you're staying and doing it. But you're right that, I mean, in the sense, our medicine or health is more reactive for most of us. It's sort of, I got a headache, so I'll go to the doctor. And there's a little bit more awareness because, we've done things like this, Genome Patri and 23andMe kinds of stuff. So you need a little bit of your things and you say, oh, okay, I better take care of it a little myself. But it's sort of like New Year's Eve kind of a thing, it spikes on January 1st. And then by February 1st, you forgot to take care of yourself.
Absolutely.
So it's a very up
Absolutely.
and down kind of a thing.
Yeah. So I mean, what if I could tell you we could make healthcare fun, interesting, and something which you live with rather than something you just go to? And Daniel Kraft says it well. We both know him, and
Right.
I was with him in the US, but he talks about sick care versus healthcare, right? And we did a talk together on John Warner's channel, and I think what we're promoting is, the idea that if we can use a combination of media, technology, and smart services, we can educate and entertain. And the way that came up is my kids would watch House MD and they'd watch ER and all that, and they'd learn a ton and come to me and start asking questions. And I'm like, I started thinking, the light bulb went on. I'm like, rather than preaching to them, why not make it interesting and exciting sometimes without making it sensational? And at the same time, give it in a way which really sticks, because, I think the data is very clear that if you teach to the upper cerebral function, it's one thing, but if you teach to the frontal lobe with emotions, it will stick in a different way. So memory formation and that sort of stuff is very interesting that way. The second part is the platform itself has to be owned by the patient. And they have to have biometric keys on a blockchain with AI. And what we need to be is their shepherds. We always need to keep the patient in the center of the universe. And we need to be their kind of angels on the shoulder, if you want to call it that, and walk with them in their shoes. It's like Chief Tecumseh of the Indians, the American Indians, said that if you haven't walked 1,000 steps in someone's shoes, you really don't know what they're thinking. You don't know, how they're going to lead their lives, because it's not just the obvious parameters. It's also socioeconomic. It's also familial. It's also cultural. And then the last part is organizing the medical suites, where I think there's a huge gap, because doctors often see the patients when they're sick, but after they leave the office, the typical thing, they're so busy and we can't scale the doctors. I mean, in India alone, there's 1.35 billion patients. There's only 1.6 million doctors, of which 1 million are allopathic. And if you look at India's composition, it's 70% rural, 30% metro, and only 2% of allopathic docs make it out to the rural areas, and that too during their internship. So they're not the highly trained ones. And I understand the problems. They can't get their kids educated. They don't get paid on par. And there are other things. I totally get it. But what we need to do is be able to scale medicine to many more people and intervene early and often. Even simple things done, and we're probably going to get to it, but the YouTube channel we'll talk about in a second. But that was an effort to kind of act as a lightning rod to start dialogues, kind of like what you do so beautifully with your Ink Talks. We tried to do with our humble YouTube channel in a pandemic where things were going from preprint to headlines and scaring the hell out of people without evidence-based links. And so someone needed to be the patient's advocate and talk in their language and sort of address basic issues. and help them to cope with, the signal to noise, which was around.
Yeah.
So that's the nutshell.
And I think in some ways, what you're saying is that your background in technology, medicine, entertainment, and understanding human behavior are all coming together
You betcha.
to make it interesting for me to watch my own health.
And I was going to address one thing you asked. The EduTech, which we formed, was kind of formed in the same thing because we thought about disseminated instances where you use mobile phones and things back in 2012-13 for healthcare. And one of my people said, look, education is the same way. And this was before the unicorns and everything else. Very interesting story. We'll have to catch up there. But there was not enough bandwidth, and the cost per GB was so high. And so 50% of our users are out. But along the way, we learned so many lessons on how to create a company, how to build all of this stuff. And I'd done some of it before. That was great. And then creating the film company even brought it further in terms of great content. But we were able to kind of bring this. And then I've always been the gadget guy, and I worked with Vishal on Goki as the chief medical officer and did other things. So I agree with you. All paths sort of converge eventually.
Yeah. And, one of the things this also leads to, this is something you also talk about, is how little health literacy is there in India. Forget the rural, whatever, even in urban, many of us, we just don't even know what's happening inside our bodies or what's there, etc. In what way, what you're doing, or maybe what should health professionals, innovators, all of us, what do we need to do to make India more health literate?
And this is a great question. And I think there's several things. One is the amount of time an individual practitioner has with a patient, very limited. At most 5 minutes, they're going to listen to what you say, write you a chitti, and send you on your way, even if they want to spend more time. And believe me, the docs in India are phenomenal. I mean, I've worked with them time and again, and they are on par or better than docs all over the world. We have a good educational system. We just don't have enough of them. That's the case. So I think what needs to happen is we need to come together and form this public-private partnership where we both entertain and educate. We provide ways to make health interesting, make it social, and create a movement rather than creating just a platform, product, or service. And when we do that, the level of trust will go up because it's not us telling them what to do, right? It's not me preaching to them. It's instead me starting a dialogue and saying, look, here's the links. You read them for yourself. This is what I think. Tell me what you think, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other part of it is, India is not one India. It's 29 states, 7 union territories, composed of many different religions, many different language bases and all that. And, my humble attempt in English has to be translated. We're working on that. It has to be subtitled or dubbed or something, but we need to take it to a higher level and teach early and often and create beacons of light in each of the villages, gram panchayats, and cities, which talk about the same thing, and maybe create health kits with the government and with the private sector to provide it. And one thing you said, which was beautiful, that India has an epidemic of diabetes. It has an epidemic of heart disease. It has an epidemic of strokes, right? And that is overshadowed right now by the pandemic globally. But honestly, then there's other things like dengue and malaria. I wrote a very strong position piece on malaria and the fact that, it is still endemic. There still are people dying of it in a country where theoretically we've, in parts of it, like Kerala and all that, we have some of the highest educational quotients. So I think what needs to happen is, A, the private and public sector need to come together and work on this. And B, as a population, we need to take it upon ourselves and take responsibility for our health sooner than later with the right educational pieces in place.
Yeah. This is the next question is very important, especially where we are also. We are in the Andhra Pradesh MedTech zone, where it is all about how can we create, automation So in what way can we use automated tools, mechanisms, robots, etc., in healthcare systems for better efficiency and outcomes? And how do we balance it? Because obviously there is no, empathy in robots. I mean, of course, the way the robots are evolving with AI, maybe they'll be more empathetic than real human beings. But it's sort of there is a surgeon's instinct, etc. Where is the balance between the two?
It's a great question. There's a couple of layers to this question. The first is in patient interactions, the basic triage could be done by a bot, right? And kind of move you towards whether or not you need to be evaluated immediately, whether you need a phone call, whether you need an ambulance to take you to the nearest OPD or ER or whatever. The second layer is people who you can build trust mechanisms with. Because I think it's very important, this whole GP concept, the original one, is going away in the US as well as here, as well as globally, to kind of not factories, but to, hospitals buying practices, right? And what we need to do is personalize it a little bit, where we might use a physician care extender, to be your quarterback or be your representative. And then they coordinate with all of the other elements. And that's what we're building in our systems. What we realize is it has to be scalable. And since there's not enough physicians, they can't be the only link in there. What physicians lack globally, as well as in India, is infrastructure to really connect the dots, right? That's one of the bigger gap problems. Now, as far as devices and all of that, I think there's some very interesting devices out there that can collect data and potentially preemptively diagnose stuff. And I would say you divide it. If you look at ultra HNI or very wealthy, you look at middle class, you look at poor, you use different mechanisms using the same infrastructure to get it out. But the bottom line is two things happen. One is we detect disease before it happens, potentially, right? By trends. And I will tell you that we're in our nascency of devices. No one really knows what the data means. We're learning each and every day. It's sort of like the CAT scanner in the 90s when I was training came on the scene, and they were very expensive and hard to get, and they would provide a wealth of information. But what we found eventually within 10 years is that we got a lot of incidentalomas where we were operating on benign things and not without complication. And these things didn't really lead to outcomes differences. And so I think we're in our nascency of devices. And then the last thing is bringing everyone together to kind of get one universal standard. And some of the stuff that iSpirit's working on, some of the stuff that you've been working on, the government, we've been working on, kind of comes together to do that. Last thing is making it sustainable. How do you make it sustainable for such a big population? And I think my view is that you need to privatize and make it affordable. Because India is a volume equation. And if we build it here and build it well, we can, transfer that anywhere on the planet. And my guess is all of the other countries would love to have something which is cheaper than what they're providing and still has better outcomes.
Yeah. Talking about balance, Ram, I actually have a personal question for you. One of the things that's most important that came up, especially during this COVID times, is, certain balance of mental and physical well-being, right? And part of the mental well-being is your relationships, etc. And you are in a very unique situation of you're in some ways two famous people married to each other. And when Madhuri first came to US, nobody knew who she was. She led a certain life. And then you came here to India, leaving your, very, very kind of a upswing practice there to come here. And you always told me that, we are just normal people. And I've been at your house and you're more normal than normal. But how do you maintain that? And also your children, raising our children these days, for most of us, our children have way more than we ever did when we were growing up.
Absolutely.
So you have to keep them balanced. You have to keep them always grounded, etc. So, what is your mantra of staying grounded? Because it's especially, when I was interviewing James Cameron a long time ago, he said most of Hollywood, rewards you for being a bad boy, So, especially in entertainment, even in medicine. I mean, people look at the doctors like God, right? They worship
Yeah.
you. In all that, how do you stay grounded and keep your mental happiness, because that's extremely important at the center of our being. So share a little bit about that.
So it's not easy. That's the
Yeah.
first thing. And to be honest, neither of us grew up in these titles, nor did we have, anything placed on us. And we grew up fairly middle class, but we, through hard work and perseverance and great people around us, our parents and others, we were able to make it. And, my advice to people is just look at things one step at a time, one day at a time, and don't worry about what other people think. Focus on what you guys think of each other. I think you said it well that, in the US as well as here, we were fairly simple people. We're not bothered by the trappings. Now, the other thing you find, and I think, everyone is wired differently. Everyone's kind of set point on what makes them happy is really the issue. And let me just talk about that. Psychiatrist at Harvard wrote a very nice paper on this. He said that we need to stop counting. What we need to do instead of that is to look at what we have and be grateful and not worry about that. And it's interesting because my office has a chawl in front of it, and it's like a sea of blue tarp. I put it up on my Insta the other day, and right next to it is this 15-story high rise. And I just asked myself, and my thing is I hire on meritocracy, and so some of my guys live there, and I've gone to their house, and it's equally fun because it's all attitude, right? And so my thing is, be grateful for everything you have, number one. Number two, don't worry about what people say. And number three, don't get caught up in the nonsense. There's a lot of, things where you're keeping up with the Joneses because someone told you that's cool. Well, you know what? You define cool. It's like someone once told me, you either read the news or make the news. You take your pick. But the point is that you need to strive high. Last thing I'm going to say is the gifts and the giving. If you do something that helps others, it'll always come back to help you. And if you look at what you do with impact, because at some point, my hope is that everyone in the audience, as well as all of us, have enough to eat, have a roof over our head, and have a great family around them. Beyond that, how much more do you need, right? And what you need is to say that, is the world a better place than when you came into it, when you leave?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. With that, I'd love to open it up for questions. AMTZ, Trishul, you guys can turn on the camera if anyone wants to come up and ask, or if there's anything online. There is a question online from Dilip. It says that, hello, doctor, being cardiac surgeon, please suggest to our innovators and scientists at AMTZ, what do you expect from us? We should focus on next 2 years on which med technology. So what kind of a medical technology should we focus on for the next couple of years?
So I've looked at quite a few. I was just in the US at MIT and at Harvard, as well as chatting with Dan and all the other guys. I think there's a couple of things. If we can create corridors in India for hardware development, looking at critical problems, and create partnerships with the hospital chains, because the problem is docs are so busy that they don't have the time for basic science. And so if we can create a pathway where we can find fundamental problems, maybe have some of the scientists go to the hospitals and vice versa, and look at what's possible, right? That to me would move the needle. Don't you think that if we can at least identify what issues are occurring, and not for a global audience, that'll come. But I'm saying even for India, if we can look at what's happening on the metro, the rural, and the and the outskirts and see where we can improve care. We can find and create gadgets as well as processes and services which will change it. The second thing is creating models which are sustainable, right? Ramesh Rasker did this very well with his Redx project, where he divided the innovation part and the entrepreneurship part, and then brought them back together. And what I think is that the innovators who are creating should be part of the solution. And when things start to do well, they should get rewarded as well, because that adds a lot of incentive. Otherwise, what's going to happen, and this is happening in the US, is all the top talent is going to industry. And we don't want that. What we want is a combination, right? I spoke about this at UCLA and USC, and I said that, look, we need to create IP that's self-sustaining so you never have to rely on grants. If we can create a foundation and create an IP bank, and then a portion of that goes to whatever company or pharma comes in, a portion goes to us, a portion goes to the innovators, all of a sudden you've got a sustainable instance. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is finding great mentors throughout India and the US. And there's a lot of us who want to give back. I'm here physically, but I can tell you there's a lot of well-to-do Indians who have done well, you know, as well as I do, all over the planet, who would be more than happy to donate their talents, money, and networks to building better things. They just need to have some exposure on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Just need to know how. Anybody from the audience at AMTZ, are there any questions? Yeah. Please say your name and ask the question.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Kavita. Thank you, sir, for this wonderful conversation. I wanted to know if you had any challenges in your journey and how you were able to overcome those challenges. Thank you.
So it's a great question. Everyone has challenges, right? From the fact that I was, quote unquote, a zero generation. I was talking to the dean of the film school at USC, and she corrected me.
Oh, Elizabeth.
Yeah, Daly.
Oh,
she's
great,
a sweetheart and very,
she's
very
wonderful.
smart.
Yeah.
And so she corrected me in that she said, you're a zero generation, your kids are first generation, because I was born in London. But the thing is, it wasn't easy growing up in a foreign environment and overcoming obstacles. And, you know, to some degree, I hate to say it, but prejudice was alive and well. And, you know, because you are not Caucasian and from there, and that reared its head. I don't want to go political, but 4 years we ate that the last 4, and it's just changed again. But my point is, overlook all that, because if you're good, merit always floats to the top, and you'll work hard. And Indians tend to, you know, really push hard because they've seen scarcity and adversity. The second thing was some of the mindsets, right? I mean, even now people are like, why aren't you practicing surgery and all that? Because I see a bigger playing field that we need to address. And as a heart surgeon, we did amazing work, very rewarding and just outstanding experience. I mean, my patients were my life, and, you know, I treated them like family. I would do the same for them as I did for my own family. But the biggest thing is I couldn't scale it to the level which I think we're capable of. And then the last thing, you know, particularly now, is there's always stuff, and you should not worry about what people say or how they do this. Always think about what you want to achieve and what impact you want to create, and stay to your dream and execute one by one the steps in that. And it's going to be different for everyone, but don't let, I look at failures as learning points, not as failures. And when you do that, you can move ahead.
So there's a question from live stream audience, Naeem Syed. Now you understand this question. I don't quite get all the acronyms, but it says, is CTVS a diminishing field as there are developments on non-invasive technologies which are done by interventional cardiologists? CABG and other surgical procedures are there. The biomedical industry is developing rapidly, and there might even be non-invasive bypass or laparoscopic. So is it becoming obsolete? I hope you understand the question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And this is what I talked about earlier, that we're moving from maximally invasive to minimally invasive. And to a degree, I would say all of CT may be, I mean, all of cardiology, all of that may be obsolete. It's what Bones McCoy said of the Starship Enterprise, that, you don't want to be medieval when you can treat externally. And that, they brought up a great point. Having said that, those same physicians, to become a heart surgeon, first of all, is such a demanding road, and very elite, very hardworking, ridiculous hours, ridiculous kind of stress levels. Those same people, when retasked to do endovascular work or to do other things, can do great things. I'm a testament to that, right? That I'm a heart surgeon, but that level of rigor which I apply, where millimeters and milliseconds make the difference between life and death. If you apply that to all of your processes, your partners all know what they're getting. They know they're going to get something which is perfect from the word go, because in my life, I didn't have the options. I didn't have, if I didn't do something well, it wasn't a matter of, something failing at the box office. It was something failing in a patient. And that wasn't something I could accept. So to his point, I would say all of medicine is changing. Wouldn't you say that things are becoming shifted from acute care to chronic care to some degree, and to prevention, early recognition, early treatment? And so I think what will happen is we'll adapt, and we'll retask, and we'll redeploy as to what the need is. I mean, they've talked about it in workforces that AI will wipe out 40% of the jobs, but that won't eliminate them. And I think the human equation still has to be there. I think what'll happen is, are we going to be doing something else? Because they're still some of the most talented people in the world, right? And are they going to become bankers or lawyers or something else? No, I think they always wanted to take care of people, and they always want to do that. So they'll find their way. Sorry, you're muted, Lakshmi.
No, I just wanted to say, anybody from AMTZ audience, there are some things coming on live stream, but yeah, go ahead.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Rimi, and hi to Madhuri ma'am if she's around. Okay, so I have a question to Dr. Nene. So the kind of global exposure that you have, and stayed in India and US and around. So I would like to know, the kind of innovation in the healthcare sector and medical sector, the kind of innovation that is happening, where do you see India standing? And what are the areas that maybe in the healthcare sector, India needs more of innovation and improvement?
It's a great question. Thank you for that. Nice to meet you. So India is an interesting sort of equation. First off, I think things have to be, by their very nature, scalable to hundreds of millions of people. And we need to tackle the simple problems first, and then the more complicated problems as we tackle the simple problems. So what I would do, and what I think this is the strategy, that look at what is causing issues now. Like Lakshmi said with diabetes, right? Huge endemic population and huge opportunity, because the data on diabetes is very clear that if you can decrease the area under the curve, meaning your sugars are more stable, the outcomes difference in terms of chronic disease with kidneys, with hearts, with nerves, with strokes, all that improves. Now, how do you do that? And it has to be a combination of approaches. Some of it is social, through media and through training people. Some of it is technology and devices and medicines. And some of it is intervention and triage, where people come in. I'll give you an example of this. Dr. Rosker and LVP, the programs which we did and they did with LV Prasad, invented this device which puts lenses on camera phones and screens for flare hemorrhages in patients who are diabetic. And for all of you who don't know, because we have such an endemic population, flare hemorrhages, when they occur in the retina, can lead to blindness if they don't get laser coagulation in a timely fashion. Well, that's not available everywhere, right? And the key is to triage by evaluating those patients early. In the first phase, they transmitted these using a 3G or 4G camera phone with lenses on it, doing something called a fundoscopic exam to a center of higher excellence. But what I see going forward is they're going to adopt AI and automatically screen to make sure you're not at risk. And if you are at risk, get people there. The net result of that is we're going to prevent people from going blind. Now, that sounds like something interesting, but imagine if you're the patriarch of a family in the rural area and you have either a massive heart attack, have a stroke, or go blind from a diabetic retinal hemorrhage. What happens to that whole family, right? So you're changing a whole design cycle, a whole family's livelihood. And so what I see in India is if we can study this and do it in a design related fashion, seeing what the gap is and designing problems to address it in a sustainable fashion, that's there. So what are the things I can do? First, look at the disease process, go to the World Bank or go to the CDC or go to the NIH or any of the other registers. This is one point which I wanted to bring out that came out in the pandemic. India has no national register for mortality. We don't know what people die of and where they die because all of the stuff at the nursing home level, at the other levels, doesn't always get reported. And this became an issue with COVID that, we're reporting 400,000 plus dying. But, when the New York Times and others looked at satellite pictures of cremations in Delhi, and when Delhi looked at this overall mortality, it was much higher. So what's happening is we don't have an accurate census or an accurate idea of what people are succumbing to. So systems put in early and often to monitor people's health will automatically do that. And then we can know where to focus. So that's one area I think has to go in. The second one is the gap between a hospital, a clinic, a doctor's office. Even now in Mumbai, if you call at 2 a.m., the only way you can get care is to go to an urgent care. And not even that, go to an OPD in a hospital, right? There has to be a stopgap. And in the rural areas, forget it. I mean, all you have is a country doctor or, some type of clinic, and it is challenging if someone's really sick, right? So I see these as urgent needs of the day. And then on a different level, vaccines, this, that, the other, I think we're already starting along that path with different sort of pathways.
Yeah. Any other question? I mean, I think it's really what you said. I want to underscore that, Ram, is that when we say innovation, when we say what we need to, we somehow look at huge stuff, but sometimes the innovation just needs to come at the way we practice things, at the basic fundamental access to all, or, they're not glamorous, but they're innovations nonetheless.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be moonshots. You don't need to.
Yeah.
Along the way of going to space, how many things got created, right? Ballpoint pens,
exactly.
Frozen ice cream, all that. But I'm saying one step after the other. And I'm saying you have a bigger vision, you go after that, and along the way you develop all of these other processes. And that's what we're trying to address.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anything from the audience? Shishir, anybody there?
Hello, Dr. Nene. This is Shishir. Hi again. AMTZ being an ecosystem which has innovators, a large pool of innovators here, a common question that we face is how careful should one innovator be when in terms of negotiating for equity? Money is one important role, right? So that's one common question that we hear. What is your take on that?
So I think it has to be a process, right? If you look at the US with Y Combinator and all of these other startup mills, they have a lot of advisors. And I think if you haven't already created a pool of advisors, the foreign investments as well as domestic investments in early stage startups, both in healthcare and outside, is huge in India. I don't think there should be any issue in creating a sort of hub and then funneling stuff if there's interesting things going on. And with the idea that we protect all shareholders, right? I think you have to find good people who aren't just in it to turn a quick buck, and they're willing to come in at the angel level and then later come in, when VCPE money in the later stages, Series C, Series D, Series E, before you go public. But at the early levels is always the struggle. And I would say now more than ever, it's a very fertile kind of investment because it's ridiculously liquidity fueled. I mean, the amount of liquidity is phenomenal. And there are a lot of IPOs planned and whatnot. I don't know how long it'll last, but I think if there's good ideas that can translate and create business models which are sustainable, I don't see the reason why people wouldn't fund it. And then to your question with the equity and all that, there are courses. So I'm on the advisory board at IIT Jodhpur, and I also taught in the business school at IIT Mumbai. And there's courses on the startup landscape, which people teach. I taught, a seminar or something like that in that. And the idea is how to not get, screwed over, to put it quite bluntly, and not get all of your IP taken, because the sooner you dilute, the more of your pie is going to be taken. But again, it's the 100% of zero versus 1% of a billion kind of equation. And the last thing I'm going to say is you want to find people who are like you. And we put it in this language that you want to find people you can have dinner with the rest of your life, who will support you and are in the same mind space as you are. And it's tough sometimes, I will tell you, because everyone's different and some people are just out for the money, which is fine. I mean, if that's what you need to grow and you're at that stage in your trajectory, then, go to these people. But I would say even debt funding is ridiculously easy to get right now, and you don't give away your equity. So there's a lot of fundamental vehicles that you can use right now, and a lot of people out there with humongous piles that they don't know where to deploy. And so the only thing is you got to determine how you want to, structure it.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, Ram, for your time. Sorry, one more question. We'll make it last question. Go ahead.
Yes. So it's just a personal question. So what is your mantra to stay healthy? And how do you select healthy by resisting unhealthy stuff? Because unhealthy is so tempting. And how do you stay fit? How do you stay healthy? And what would be your mantra for all the young generation? Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's a great question. Some of that I've discussed on my YouTube channel, but I think the main thing is to get into a lifestyle and to kind of associate with people who believe in that lifestyle. There are going to be times in your life where, unfortunately, you're going to cheat. But factor that in and don't get disheartened. But I think the main thing is set up your goals and your aspirations, and kind of set some healthcare goals that I want to avoid this. I also have a strong family history of diabetes. I don't want to have diabetes, sorry. And so I'm going to do everything in my power. And so one of those things is I eliminated exogenous sugar from my meals, and from tea and from anything else that I drink. And if anything, it will be natural stuff, but I kind of avoid it, because there is good data that sugar is the enemy. It's no longer cholesterol. So there are some health principles. The second thing is setting up healthy lifestyles. And that includes kind of the mind, body, and soul. But I've talked about that in one talk about water, sleep, exercise, food, and then mindfulness. And I think if you practice that each and every day, the last thing I'm going to say, and this is a really good take home, give yourself an hour of power every day. What I mean by that is you need time for yourself. Wake up a little earlier, plan your bedtime accordingly, but take some time for yourself. We don't do it often enough. And it's the happiness equation. Go and take a walk, breathe, do some meditation. Think about what you want to achieve. Be grateful for the things you have. And I guarantee you, if you spend that hour, even if you spend a minute, but optimally, if you spend an hour, it can be in exercising, eating right, doing whatever. But you do that and you'll be happier. And that, at the end of it, is better lifestyles, better lifespan, right?
So what do you do to keep yourself fit around every day?
So the main thing for me is, maintaining is 85% diet, 15% exercise. And then on top of that, it's the mindfulness exercises. So I do some yoga as well as gym training and tennis and whatnot, stuff I like. One thing I found is if you don't like to work out, then find something you do like. If you like to dance, if you like to go walk your dog or go walk with friends, find something you love to do. The second thing is find food that you love and that loves you back, right? Because if, in my case, I'm lactose intolerant, if I drink milk products, it doesn't feel so good. And so those are some of the things you have to figure out early on. And then the last thing is the family and friends are what matter the most to me. And don't ever forget that part, especially this nowadays, but in general, we get so busy with our lives and travel and this and that we forget to spend the time with them. And those minutes never come back, particularly with my kids. You know, my older son's at college and the younger guy's still here and everyone's busy. My wife's shooting, I'm shooting, or I'm working on something, but make the time. And that's your hour of power, if you will.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think that's a great thing to wrap up on. We just had an hour of power, which was all intellectual stimulation, and it's the same sort of a thing. We have to go do it physically also. And Ram, as I said earlier, you are, you know, a Renaissance man for sure. And I'm glad you followed the Michelangelos of the world to be inspired, because you're a doctor, you're an engineer, you're a, you know, humanitarian, you're a parent, you're a husband, you're a son. I mean, you're sort of handling all those things well. And the thing I am privy to as a friend, you're amazing at keeping in touch and being there. So I'm really glad we had a chance to talk. And I'm really glad that in this setting, where we are bringing a lot of innovation into India in the medical technology, hopefully when the world opens up, you can visit the campus.
Absolutely.
And it's really wonderful to make this connection, because I think these huge government entities and endeavors need practitioners to interact with. And Dr. Sharma, who leads it, is an amazing person, and hopefully you all should meet sometime.
Absolutely.
And, thank you so much for your time, and thank the audience at AMTZ as well as our online audience.
Lakshmi, as always, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. And I think all the same things can be said about you. You're the Renaissance woman. And I think, aren't we all to some degree now? I mean, this last year.
To be, to survive now, you have to be. There's nothing called a specialist anymore, you know, so.
But thank you so much for the opportunity. And I look forward to seeing all of you guys more and talking to you about what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good morning. We'll see you later. Bye.
Take care.